Well, I'm sitting here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Georgia World Congress Center at the Skills USA Construction Ready Expo, and we're on top of the Strack trailer. So we're saying this episode of The Line is sponsored by Strack. They're allowing us to sit up here and have some conversations with people, so we really appreciate that. I'm here with Frank Maines with Weber Construction. And I really appreciate you stepping up to the line, Frank. What is your title at Weber? What do you do there?
My title is Project Services Manager.
Okay.
Nobody knows what that means. It really means that I help people.
Okay.
I'm a servant. Whatever needs to be done, I end up there. So I do a lot of work on the front end of projects that we're going to bid, going into new market areas and try to develop relationships with vendors and subcontractors, and make sure we have a good team going into a bid of a project. And then I stay with it through procurement. Once all the agreements are signed and everything's rolling, I kind of move on to the next thing.
Okay.
And I don't really go back unless something's gone sideways and I need to get involved in the relationship.
So, Frank, you talk about what your role is there and whatnot, and you use the word team, which is something that I think is I really believe. I don't like to say at Blackline that we're a family. I really dislike when companies use that word.
Team?
Family. When
Okay.
they say family, I wish we would use the word team. And the reason that I think that is, family, you can't decide whether that's your family or not your family. The reality is you're born into it, and that's who they are. But a team, you can decide to be a part of a team, like a baseball player or a football player. And the reason that I think it's important is as companies, and I've been a CEO, I've been a project manager, I've been a leader, I've been a founder, and people have come and gone. And if they were a part of my family, even as a founder, I would have not been able to deal with it real well. But when they're a part of a team, it's like they can decide, I want to go play for this team, or I want to go play for that team. It's really helped me in my attitude. And then it also reminds me what my job is as a leader. It's to build the team, to lead the team, and to do what you just said. I think the ultimate leader is to be a servant leader and to serve the team. My job, and your job, it sounds like, is to give them what they need to succeed. And the really interesting thing is, if you're talking about pre-procurement at Weber, I would assume you're bringing people into the Weber team that aren't on Weber payroll.
Absolutely. And we have multiple teams. Since our geography is such a large area, we don't have, I told you we don't drop into a market area and bid everything in that market area. We cover many states.
Okay.
And so our projects are, for the most part, isolated from each other.
Okay.
So the team members are different groups.
Wow. So how big of an area do you guys span?
That's a difficult question. So I work for the East Coast, and our area is Virginia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, and anything else that might come up on the periphery of that.
So that's the East Coast.
Yeah. We watch for large projects that have some of our core in them, concrete paving or structures. We can self-perform about anything, but it's better for us to get subcontractors that are local. You have a local workforce rather than try to go out and hire and build those locally. In Texas, and I work for the heavy civil division of Weber. In Texas, pretty well-known company. We're the second largest highway contractors in Texas. Texas is like a whole country all by itself. So
this is true.
I say we're number 2 is pretty bold.
Yeah, I've driven it across Texas, and it's a rather large state.
Yeah, but Weber has many divisions. One of them is called Infra. They do asset management contracts, maintenance contracts, primarily for departments of transportation, from Miami up the East Coast to, I guess, Ontario, all the way over to Anchorage.
Oh, wow.
They have some work in California. They do anything from cut the grass, pick up the garbage, maintain the bridge decks, signs, anything, road patching, anything needs to be done. And plus we have tunnel maintenance that we also do through Infra.
Wow. You do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Now I don't have anything to do with the infra, but we also have an energy division, and we have a water and sewer division that's primarily operated in Texas, but we just opened up an office in Tampa.
Okay.
So they'll be pursuing some water projects, plant projects mostly in Florida markets.
Like wastewater and water treatment?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I cut my teeth on as an apprentice electrician. So I used to, when I started, I hated the smell of a wastewater plant. And
Smells
then
like money.
That's what we started to say, because it was usually rate work, and we were like, yeah, okay, this is a good job. I was just telling a gentleman earlier that I didn't realize when I got into the trade, it wasn't my desire to be in the trades. I got into it to pay for a habit that I had. Boy, that made it sound like it was a drug problem. I should say I was wanting to fly airplanes. That's what I wanted to do. And so the school that I was going to was really expensive. And so I got a job as an apprentice electrician to pay for that. And by the time that I finished the flight school, I was making too much money that I was like, I looked at some of the salaries to be a pilot, and then there was other problems. Like I met a girl, we got married, bought a house, all of that stuff, and life. And so I wasn't desiring to do it, but then through the work and the teams of people that I got to work with, I really began to love it. And it had a lot less to do with the work and more to do with the people.
And I found in construction, I grew up in Griffin, Georgia, 40 miles south of Atlanta. I've moved as far as Coweta County. I live in Sharpsburg now. It's as far as I've ever moved away from where I grew up. I've always worked around the Atlanta market, and I've developed a lot of relationships around here in lots of different fields of construction. But what I find is that the world is really small.
Yeah.
Even here, I'm bumping into people I haven't seen in a long time, and it's important not to burn bridges that you may have to go back across at some time later. And I can say that I'm not scared to go out in the community, and I'm not always having to watch my back.
So how would you, I think that's a great statement, and I think not burning bridges is something that we don't think a lot about when we're young. If you were like me, when I was young, I thought I was right about everything. The older I get, the
I
more
was sure of it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So how do we avoid burning bridges? Like, can you give me an example?
Well, I guess for me, I've learned that I don't need to win every battle. It's okay. It's okay if I lose.
Yeah.
But if I try to understand that the person that I'm having maybe a disagreement with, we probably both have the same goal.
Yeah.
Success of a project or making a profit. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, how can we come together and steer this toward that common goal? It's and it's important to understand that everybody is important. Everybody, has something else going on in their lives, and it may just be a bad day.
Right.
You don't ever know.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. You deal with pre-construction and like you work through the contracts, and that statement of you probably have a common goal and you don't need to win every battle. That's a real level of maturity. When I was young, it was like I was putting a notch on my belt for every battle that I won, and there was great pride in it. But I did set some bridges on fire. And the reality is, I think I learned this through contract negotiation. Contracts are a big deal. I think that especially if you're a specialty contractor, and that's my experience. I've never been in the general contractor-owner relationship, except for some of our direct clients. But the point is the real contract negotiation, I think, when you're in that, recognizing that you might have 15 things in that contract that are things that you want in that contract as a specialty contractor. And you need to pick what your non-negotiables are, and they can't be all 15. They can't be all 15. Like, honestly, your non-negotiables, 3 is a lot. 3 is a lot. And I would say the importance of what you said, recognizing that you both have a common goal. Listen, if you're there talking with a GC or a contractor about a contract, that means that you Sorry, I got distracted. There was like a thing of wind in front of me.
There is a thing of wind above us.
Yeah. But you're there because they want you to be there. You either have the right number, you either have the right reputation, you have the right skill, whatever it might be. So you both have that common goal of wanting a success of doing the project together. I think the other key is to remember, I don't know if you want me to say this or not, but if you're a specialty contractor, a contract, when you win a bid, is just a proposal that you get to talk with the GC about. It doesn't mean that you have to sign it. If you have things that you're concerned about, you notate it, you send an email, you talk about it, you relate through it. Maybe you
That's
don't.
right. I mean, I can tell you that I've never seen it, and I've heard it said that it's never happened. Weber's never walked away from a subcontract because something in the paper.
Yeah.
We can negotiate everything that's written in there. The scope, pretty well defined, but there's boilerplate stuff in our contract that is painful for a lot of people that read it and have lawyers to read it. They probably aren't going to just sign it that way.
Right.
And it's one-sided.
Yeah, well, and it should be. I mean,
but,
you're putting a boilerplate out there.
And here it is.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, let us know what it is. Please don't write all over it. Write down what you don't like and send it to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we used to, in years past, redline contracts, and now we do the whole amendment thing.
Right.
The reality is it's just a conversation. You want to have that conversation, that dialogue.
And hopefully we don't ever have to look back at it. Hopefully we can just go do the work and get paid and move on to the next thing.
One of my favorite people to work with on the general contracting side said that once we were negotiating a contract, and it was, I wouldn't say it was getting contentious, but it was like we were going back and forth over different things, and I just said to him, I said, I just want to make sure that we're clear. And he said, this doesn't bother me. He said, we work these out, and we have these conversations now, and the reality is we should never talk about it again. This is only if everything goes haywire and goes wrong, we know what we all agreed to. And that's the truth of it. So, and I think that's the foundational steps in building the team that you want for a successful job. And that's another thing for us to recognize is you really don't want to go into a partnership and building a project if you're not already thinking that you're going to be on a team. If you're starting out adversarially, that's not a good sign for both parties. I'm not just speaking from a specialty contractor. It's like, it's a real good litmus test for how you're going to work together, how you're going to negotiate a deal. So,
and our host here, Strack, I've known the company, the family for 40 years. I feel like a lot of trust between me and the Strack family.
Yeah.
Literally, Joe Strack and Jonathan Strack, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of trust there. The paper is necessary, but probably
it's not
useless.
everything. Yeah. Yeah. Well, how many times I've had some conversations with Jonathan. We've talked about even contracts and things like that, and he's shared those same things with me. And about the relationship, and those are the different people that he wants to work with. Those relationships. How many times when you're on a job like that, do you have a specialty contractor that takes care of things just because that's the relationship, and vice versa? Do you just work through things and it's not this like tit for tat? I do this, you do that. It's more like let's build together.
How often does that happen?
Yeah.
Like daily.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a normal thing in what we do. You're going to run into things, and a lot of times it's better just to take care of it, and because arguing about it's going to cost time and money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Frank,
one of the neighbors over here, you mentioned that at one point in your life you knew everything.
Yeah.
One of the.
I love how you brought it back to that I said that.
Well, one of the neighbors here, he and I got in an argument probably in 1986. I at the time worked for the government. I worked for the county. And he wasn't going to win the argument. And it's funny that both of us knew that we knew everything. And he had his agenda and I had mine. And
come on,
he couldn't win.
Yeah.
Because I had to sign it.
Right.
And today I consider him a dear friend. We healed up. We got smarter. We realize every day now how much we don't know.
Yeah.
And it takes time though. It takes time, and it takes age.
How did you work through that with him? I mean, seriously, is it over time you both had a revelation, an epiphany?
You were talking about you can't win every battle.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time. I didn't realize that, but he that day I didn't really think through it that there's a bigger game here.
Yeah.
A longer game.
Yeah.
Because here we are many years later, and we still see each other all the time.
Yeah.
And we've worked together a lot since then.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn a lesson, from my behavior that day. It was wrong.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's part of life.
I think for me, when that happened, there was a point in my life when I was younger where I had an epiphany, an enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, that the only way that I was going to overcome that was to dive into humility, to say that I didn't know when I didn't know, and also, and this one was really hard for me to get, but when I made mistakes, when I had something where I had to win and I realized it, and I realized that I set that bridge on fire, you actually can go back out and put the fire out, but you really have to swallow your pride, put your ego aside, and walk over and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I messed that up. I didn't handle that right.
And I used the word trust earlier. Trust is an analogy I have. It's like a beautiful piece of china. It's useful. It's good to look at, but it's fragile. And once it's broken, trust is broken. Once the china is broken, it's very difficult to put back together.
Yeah.
And make it useful again. It's people are on guard once their trust is damaged.
Yeah.
And so it's important to keep your word. Don't give your word unless you intend to keep it.
Yeah.
And we talked about this earlier. We don't have to tell everything that we know, but it's important to tell the truth when you open your mouth. So.
That's right. I love that analogy about China. I once had a guy tell me in a meeting, he goes, trust is like an egg. And once you break the egg, and I like your analogy better because he was implying that trust cannot be regained. But I don't know if you know this, there's this famous china that they make in Asia where they take broken pottery and they meld it back together with gold. So it's all cracked and broken, and so they put it all back together with gold, and it actually ends up being more beautiful and stronger because of the way the gold interacts, and you can see it. Like, they don't hide it. They polish it and whatnot, and you can see all the cracks that have been repaired with gold. And I would say your China analogy is really good because while you don't want to break trust, the reality is things are going to happen. And if you're like me, you might make mistakes where you've broken trust.
And it could be, unintentional.
It could be unintentional. That happens.
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not intend for this to happen. I didn't intend for what I said to affect you this way. And apologies are so important. I mean,
that is the gold that we rebuild with.
I apologize. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
That can go so long. I mean, even with your family.
Yeah.
Or anybody you're around.
Well, I think that, the things that we win at work in are the things that we should win at life in. And so, if we're winning at home first, then we can win at work. I mean, it's the same things that apply. And the reality is trust can be rebuilt, but you have to really do the work.
It's much easier to just not have it broken to begin with.
True statement. So, Frank, I ask people 2 questions throughout the podcast, and one of the questions is, what is a piece of gear or a tool? And when I say gear, I mean like your vest or your shirt or a coat, something like that, or a tool that you just can't live without. One or the other. What is something that you need to use every day?
I hate to answer this question because this thing's
You're not the first person to say it.
More of an idol than anything. I just can't. So if we discount that, I can't live without my glasses because I can't see. Let's see. I'm I don't enjoy flying. Like, I don't enjoy airplane travel
Yeah.
because I generally can't take all my stuff with me.
Yeah.
So if I can drive there in 8 hours, I'm going to do that. And most of our market area is within 8 hours driving.
Yeah.
I don't. So there's a lot of things that are in my truck that I have comfort knowing
Yeah.
that they're near me. So without getting into too deep on how that is, but
So your truck, not your phone, even though you need your phone.
my truck contains a lot of things that I need
So that would be
that I
your-
feel comfortable
Yeah.
with. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of truck do you drive?
A white one.
I was looking for like an F-150, a Silverado.
So
He's like a
this
white
is
one.
This is the first Chevrolet truck I've ever driven. It's a Silverado.
Okay.
1500.
You like it?
I do.
Yeah. Well, Ford
But
will
I've
not
been
be
a-
listening to this podcast.
I've been a Ford guy almost my entire life.
Yeah.
I think I drove a Dodge truck for 2 weeks once. Now, personally, I have a Jeep,
Okay.
and I've enjoyed that. That became a hobby for quite a while.
So what would you, with Weber and what you guys do, and, we've talked a lot about team, we've talked a lot about, building and your travel. What would you say that the overall culture of Weber is as a company? What would you say is important to you guys as a company?
I wish I could recite the entire vision statement that's posted on in every office that we have, but there's a couple things in there that always come to mind. One of them is we not only we appreciate questions. We don't necessarily want to always be right, but we want to get to the best answer.
Yeah.
And we expect to be questioned.
Yeah.
And I think that's so vital for any organization, because you don't always, just because I've done it this way my whole life.
Yeah.
That's maybe not the best way. And there's a lot of people coming along behind me that might know a better way, a way to get to the goal I want, but a different route, easier. And it's important to be accepting of those questions and don't tell somebody that's a stupid question. Our vision statement is full of things like that. They're simple concepts, but they're kind of like kindergarten. You hold hands when you cross the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's we go together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But integrity.
What would you say integrity is? Everybody uses that word. It's a buzzword. Don't put it on your website.
Well, I mean, so, I heard somebody say one time that if you always tell the truth,
Yeah.
you don't have to remember what you said, because it always
Yeah.
comes out. But
Yeah.
if you're not being truthful, you have to try to remember.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Is that integrity? Integrity doing character, I guess, is acting the right way.
Yeah.
When you don't know anybody's watching. Everybody's watching
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And so you need to be careful about your behavior all the time.
Boy, that's the truth. That's the truth. And in construction, that's one of the things that, a lot of times you might be put in situations where nobody's watching. And the reality is what you do really matters. And that importance of integrity when no one can see what you're doing, that you still do it the right way. The other statement I would say, and this comes really true in construction, if you don't do it the right way, it's going to come back to haunt you.
Mm-hmm. It's cheaper to do it the right way first.
Oh, my goodness. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's efficient. It's good. So I think that culture is one of those things that companies, we need to promote, we need to invest in, and we need to know what it is. And it's about who we are as a company. And we really want to take and put handles on our culture and hand that off to our people. Hand off trust, hand off integrity, hand off not burning bridges, these things, making sure that not just the next generation, but the new team member, the new person that is in our office or whatever, that we're handing off that stuff. Are there ways that Weber does that, other than, you got it posted and whatnot? How does Weber invest in their culture, putting handles on things and handing them off to other people? And if you don't, we can talk later.
No, I think maybe, look at me, I'm old. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I can share my experiences and those mistakes with the younger generation coming up. we have a pretty young workforce,
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I don't really know how to do anything, but I probably know somebody that knows how.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute, and I'll find some help here.
Yeah.
There's how do we pass that on? I think constant contact, just having frequent conversations, and not having somebody out there on an island by themselves afraid to ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at something, I don't understand what it is. Can you help me? Can you come look at this with me?
Yeah.
And somebody's in the truck on the way down there, or whatever. It's that easy.
Yeah.
So
What is I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question. What is a mistake that you've made that you're willing to share with our listeners that you've learned from? I personally believe that when we share our mistakes and when we talk about them, that's the only way that we can overcome them and learn from them. And so what's a mistake that Frank has made over his career that he's really learned from? And you might have already covered this, but go a little bit deeper with me here. What's something that you've done that you've learned from that maybe you could share that other people could learn from not to do it?
I think pride is a poison, and when you take things personally that are happening, and it's really not about the person.
Yeah.
It's about the situation. And if you can remove your dislike for the person that you're dealing with and work on solving the problem, and that's probably where my mistakes have resonated from, is just personal pride. I want it to be my way, and I don't want it to be your way because it's your way.
Yeah.
It needs to be, and my kids joke about this. They're like, "Dad, you're a micromanager." And they said they're going to get me a sign to hang in the kitchen. I'm not a micromanager, but you're doing that the wrong way. My daughter, came in the kitchen a while back and opened the drawer and got out a knife, and she's going to cut vegetable. I don't know what it is. And I kind of looked, and she goes, "Which knife do you want me to use?" So, and that kind of goes back to my thing about pride. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes because of that, and hopefully recovered from them.
Yeah.
But and it's humiliating to admit, but probably true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love how you say that pride is a poison. Poison kills. It kills relationships. It kills you. It kills everything. And that's something. Earlier this morning I was talking with a guy, and he said, ego is the problem on the job site. And he's like, ego is something that we need to avoid. And I think ego can be a form of pride, but pride even goes deeper. And that comes back to even what we were talking about in the beginning, where it's like, well, I have to win. When I was younger, that was pride, and as I get older, for me, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made is not looking internally and trying to be self-aware. Because sometimes I've had ego or pride and I didn't even realize it. I didn't even know it. And the only way that I've been able to be self-aware, and this is pretty painful, is reaching out to other people that I have on my team saying, will you hold me accountable in this? I mean, even just here this week, I called a close team member and I said, listen, I'm having a problem with this situation. And he said, well, be careful that your pride isn't in that, because that problem might not be a problem. It might just be your problem. And I was like, oh, right. That's true. And so there have often been times where I felt like, I need to deal with this now. And I've started this rule of, if I have a crisis or an emergency or something, it truly doesn't need to be dealt with in the moment, I'm going to wait 24 to 48 hours before I respond. And it does a couple of things. One, usually it actually takes care of itself and I never have to do anything with it. Or I realize it was my problem and I need to deal with me, not the issue. Or thirdly, I've been able to gather some thought and deal with the problem intelligently rather than emotionally.
You've heard people probably talk about being able to know the difference between when something is important and when it's urgent.
Yeah.
Some things are important, but they're not urgent. Some things are urgent.
Yeah.
But they're not really important.
Yeah.
Now, when you get something that's urgent and important, do that first. Yeah. Some are neither urgent nor important, but I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
You do that last.
Yeah.
So that being able to sort through those I guess that grid
Yeah.
is an important asset to have.
I actually think so. In our company, we call that triage, and I think it is a very important thing. And the history of triage actually comes from World War I. I believe it was a French. You can Google this and comment on how I was wrong, but I believe it was a French doctor who all these soldiers were dying on the battlefield, and this French doctor actually started going through the wounds because everybody was wounded, and so he'd put a mark on the head of these really critical patients where it was like it's a chest wound or it was a head wound or something like that they would die, and then he would mark them at different levels. If you had a broken arm, you were triaged and it was not as important. And they realized, when we triage something, we actually can save the individual, because you can live with a broken arm longer than you can live with a chest wound,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about that, so that's something that we do in our organization, where it's like, all right, let's triage the project. Because if we don't triage it and deal with what matters appropriately in this problem, then the project dies, and we can't have it die. So how do we keep it alive? And being able to look at those things and what you said about urgent versus important, and if it's important, it doesn't. I mean, that's a form of triage, which is the same thing that we do.
Sure.
We think that's really important. So, not urgent, but really important. So, well, Frank, I really appreciate you sitting down here talking with us, sharing your heart about culture, sharing your heart about, man, you touched on some deep things with pride, with mistakes, with working together as a team. And I appreciate Weber being a company that is investing in culture and building their teams and growing in the way that they're growing. You having a conversation with us and sharing honestly and authentically what it is that you guys are doing. I appreciate that. It makes a difference.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah.
Honestly, you snuck up on me and got me up here. I wasn't thinking about doing this at all today.
Well, good.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the time.
Well, I'm really glad that you took the time to sit down with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.